Good morning. My name is Deb Hazzard. As was mentioned, I am the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs at the Darla School of Business.
Could you speak into the mic?
No, which is where?
No, it's okay. This is the camera and mic both together.
Okay. So that's a challenge. I typically don't present standing still, but we're going to make it work. So I am excited to be here today from South Carolina. I am, in addition to being an Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs, I'm also an Associate Dean of what we call Access, Opportunity, and Community Engagement. It used to be Diversity and Inclusion, but we reframed that and continue to do the work. So we have reframed that and are just making sure that we serve all of our students that have a need and ensure that they are successful. So again, I currently hold 2 Associate Dean appointments. I am also a full professor in management. And I will say full clinical professor. I think that is important because the sort of perspective that I bring to the table tends to be a bit different from some of my colleagues who are tenured and tenure track. But I think coming together is complementary, but it is a different perspective. So my background is in business and industry. I've worked in financial services. I've worked in the public sector. So I really bring all of that into academia. And I think that's important as I begin this presentation because this truly is my attempt to develop a model that helps lead the way business school goes forward in terms of innovating and meeting the needs that are currently what we are facing in academia. So with that, I'll sort of move through. So the moment that we are in, and I think this is probably no surprise to anyone in the room, we see AI really accelerating in our context. There is volatility in terms of the labor market and instability when we think about skills, okay? And so I'll talk a little bit about what we're currently doing right now as higher education institutions. But, you know, one of the things that I think, and this is just my personal perspective, my supposition is that we are purveyors of talent for the marketplace. We're preparing talent to go out into the marketplace. And in order to do that, in order to make them future ready, we've got to understand that future readiness is a leadership and design problem. It's not all about the content that we're infusing into courses. So just in terms of what we are currently doing, and again, this is informed by not only my own experience, but also I've taken a lot of time and really sort of studied what's going on at other institutions in higher ed. But what's currently being done is that I see a lot of people adding AI modules or adding AI to courses, expanding experiential learning. I'm not saying any of these things are bad. I'm saying this is what I'm seeing as our current approaches. We're embedding analytics into our curriculum and then also launching new credentials. But in the midst of all of that, what we're doing really does still seem fragmented. And again, this is informed not only by what I see at my own institution, but I've really tried to take a lot of time and see what's going on at other institutions as well. I think these things are all good work, but I think it's important to understand that it still feels fragmented. And I think it's because we're not using a systems type approach. We're kind of just adding some things in piecemeal, or at least that's what it feels like. So what is the problem? The problem is that I think partly a lot of what we're doing is course-centric design. We're focused on courses as opposed to systems. I think some of the innovation is fragmented. I am not anti-AI. I think AI is absolutely amazing, but I think we've got to figure out how to infuse it in a way that is systems level and not just adding modules to courses. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure I'm doing everything I need to do here. So, but I think that this is certainly progress that we're making, but it still feels fragmented. And the approaches that we're currently employing, in my professional opinion, are not going to produce capability at scale. And I think as business schools, what we have to do is engage in approaches that are going to produce capability at scale. So I think with that, what we have to do is to reframe what we are looking at. Because again, it is a systems problem, but we're trying to address a systems problem with course level solutions. So I think we move from looking at our content as being just courses to actually being capability systems. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by capabilities, because I think we're not just preparing students anymore for roles. I think we're preparing them for conditions. And it was mentioned earlier, some of those conditions are volatility, uncertainty, imperfect information. Those are the sort of conditions that we're preparing them for, and they have to be able to make decisions in the midst of those things. So that requires them to have a certain set of capabilities. I think we move from just innovating to ensuring that there is alignment in what we're doing. So innovation is absolutely important, but there has to be alignment. Sometimes, at least in my experience, what I have seen in academia is that we tend to do a lot of activity. Things are going on, courses are being redesigned, things are being done and all of that. But people tend to sort of push back a bit on assessment, assurance of learning, those things that we as academics would call evidence. So that's never been taught. Right. You know, it's just, it is one of the things that really sort of behooves me that as academics, you know, evidence is something that is important in our research, but when we talk about that as it relates to teaching, it seems to be like, well, what do you mean? You know, that we should assess and see whether or not our courses are actually doing what they need to be doing, our students actually learning. And I think we move from teaching to actually development, right? So whatever content we deliver, whatever we are doing with these students, we're actually developing them to be successful in the business environment. Again, shifting from role preparation to actually being able to navigate uncertainty. That's what I think is extremely important. So what are some of these capabilities? I will tell you that much of this is informed by the World Economic Forum's 2025 report, where employers are telling us that what they need in the future workforce is adaptability. They need learning agility. They need ethical judgment, integrated thinking and problem solving, and also professional identity. Do they have the norms? Do they have the values? Are they showing up as professionals? And I think that this is something that's really important. And this might be a moment for us to think whether or not what we're currently doing is developing these future capabilities in the workforce, in the future workforce. We're preparing talent to go out. This is what employers are saying that they need. Are the students who are emerging from our programs, do they possess these future capabilities? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what produces these capabilities. I began to think a lot about this. So I think the capabilities are built in a number of different ways, and I'm going to share this in the form of a model, but this is just sort of a brief overview. I think some of it relates to curriculum architecture, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I think that's important. It's not just about content, it's curriculum architecture. The next thing is we can build capabilities through experiential learning opportunities. And I think even with that, we have to broaden our mindset because experiential learning doesn't just mean internship. I think it's broader than that. And I think, and this may be something that's a little bit controversial, but I think experiential learning should be a requirement, not optional. That's me, you know, so don't shoot the messenger, but that's what I think. Learning technology. I think learning technology, and I'm going to include AI in that because whether or not we want to acknowledge it, AI is a technology that is actually impacting how we not only teach, but how students learn or if they learn. Okay. And then assessment and AOL. I think those things are all important, and that's how you build future capabilities. Now, what I also have down here, and I think it may be a little bit difficult to see just because this is a PowerPoint or that I put this in a PDF, but the other things that are important to build these capabilities are agile governance and integrative leadership. And I'm going to say those again because we're talking about the higher ed context. Agile governance. Would any of you define your governance in your institution as being agile right now? Probably not, but I think that's going to be important for us as we seek to develop these future capabilities. And then integrative leadership, because again, I think it's not just about a one-off adjustment to curricular or content or anything like that. I think it truly is about leadership and design, okay? So we're going to move forward here. Now, here's an absolute moment of transparency. I've been in academia for 13 years, have never designed my own model. This is the first. And let me tell you that I have changed this even since last night, and I'll tell you those changes because they're not reflected here. So I just keep sort of iterating and iterating. So I'll tell you that with this, one of the things that you see here at the very top is curriculum architecture, okay? These are all the things that I talked about a bit earlier that are ways that we help develop these capabilities. I think the curriculum architecture is extremely important. And again, I have this flywheel here because this is meant to indicate that this is a cycle. We need to continue to make these changes. We continue to iterate. But with curricular architecture, it's not just about course content, it's about sequencing and it's about scaffolding. So do you introduce certain things in your foundational, maybe first year courses? And then how do you continue to develop those concepts or build those capabilities as they matriculate through your institutions? So from curriculum architecture to learning technologies, I do believe it is important to infuse technology into our learning. I think, and again, AI is one of those things. How can we leverage it? I don't think the answer is just to say, don't use AI to cheat. I don't think that's it. I think what we have to understand is that there are many employers that are actually monitoring whether or not their employees are using AI on a daily basis to perform tasks to help them become more productive and more efficient. They're monitoring that. So if we're not giving them opportunities to build these capabilities, are we really preparing them for the workforce that they're going to go into? So again, learning technologies, and again, including AI, I think, you know, the thing to understand is thinking about AI is really what sort of led me to begin to think about how we're preparing our students and are we really developing the capabilities that they need in order to be successful. Now, one of the significant changes I made here is that I actually swapped the placement for experiential learning and assessment, or AOL. So on the newest version of this model, experiential learning rests here, okay? Because again, as I really thought about it being a cycle, experiential learning here, where, okay, let's subtract at least 30 seconds for me admitting this person. Oh, somebody admitted it, so, all right, awesome. So let's see, assessment in AOL and then experiential learning. So again, I swapped places there, and then assessment would be right here at the sort of at the end of the cycle. But again, this is iterative. Okay. So this is what I see as our future capability, leadership, and governance model. Now, I have to mention here that something that's a vital part of this model is the agile governance. And this willingness and ability to be adaptive. Like, I just have to say, coming into academia from working in business and industry, the fact that it takes almost 2 years to make any sort of substantive change in a course, that's not okay. So we've got to figure out how to navigate through that. And I will tell you that personally, and I'm sort of telling some of my trade secrets here, one of the things that I've been doing to get around that, at least as a faculty member, is introducing special topics courses, because I can teach those for at least 2 to 3 semesters without having to go through the full scale approval process. We've got to have agile governance. That's the way that we're going to keep pace. Right now, there is a mismatch between the pace of change in the real world business environment and how we are able to change things within academia. It's not a good thing, but this is not a doom and gloom message. There is hope. Okay. So agile governance is extremely important. So too is leadership integration. Okay. And, you know, this cannot be done from a bottom-up level or a top-down level. I think it has to be done going both ways, but certainly leaders have to step in and say, this is what we're going to do. Let's come together and let's figure it out. I will tell you that one of the things that we cannot continue to do in academia, and I don't know if this is just the institutions that I am associated with or familiar with, but we can't continue to operate in silos. We cannot. It's not effective. It's not efficient. We can't continue to operate in silos. So this is what it looks like as of this point, again, swapping these two. And then this box down here at the bottom, I moved further down just to show that these capabilities really sort of rest at the bottom of this model. But this is what we're trying to build. These are the future capabilities that employers are saying they need in the talent that we're preparing for the workforce. So again, you're learning agility, ethical judgment, adaptability, all of these things. That's what this model sort of rests on. That's the foundation. That's what we should be doing when it comes to how we educate and prepare talent for the workplace. So that's sort of the model that I have come up with. But I think one of the most important things to mention here is that we have to begin to look at this from a design perspective, but a systems perspective, right? And understand that this is a leadership and design problem. It's not a course level problem. It's not a content problem. It's extremely important. With that, I will say, and I've talked a little bit about this, governance is absolutely the lever. You know, we've got to find faster pathways to innovate. Certainly need to empower faculty to innovate in all of that, but there also has to continue to be a level of accountability. And that's where I think the assessment can help, because we need to be able to have evidence that what we're doing is working. Okay, I think that's something that's really important. I do have a question down here. This is sort of food for thought for each of you that are listening. How do we govern AI-enabled learning in ways that are coherent, accessible, and responsible? Somebody is listening with volume on. Okay, how do we govern AI-enabled learning in ways that are coherent, accessible, and responsible? And I think that's a question for all of us. The other things that I want to make sure that I call out as a part of this discussion today are the importance of equity. I think I've already talked a bit about employer alignment, and then I mentioned the World Economic Forum's report, and really that we need to make sure that we're providing what employers need. But equity as well, right? Because at least from my experience in higher ed, you know, some of those that don't necessarily have institutional knowledge or insights, or, you know, I'm thinking of first generation or other students that identify as such, if they don't just know what to do or where to go or how to access certain things, they can be left out. So I think it's important to build in equity to our processes. It's also one of the reasons that I think that that the experiential learning opportunity should be a requirement and not necessarily optional. Because they really can be the competitive advantage for some of the students that take advantage of them, okay? At the end of the day, I think what's important, what I want to leave with you all, is that it truly is about design. You know, from a leadership perspective, we have to understand that what we need to be designing is systems and not courses. We've got to align this innovation with rigor. And we've got to make sure that what we're doing, we can scale it, okay? But we have to produce these capabilities in students in order for them to go out into the workforce and be successful. And so one of the questions here that I have posed for you all is, what is one governance lever that you could adjust in the next academic year? What is one? And that is, you know, I'm asking you that because we really do need to ensure that we are preparing our students to be successful. and developing these future capabilities. I think that's something that's super important. Of course, with my speaking outline, there was so much more that I was supposed to say, but that is all I am going to say. I thank you all so much for listening. And if you all have any questions, if it's okay to take questions, not sure if I can answer them, but hey, thank you so much for listening.